H.P. Lovecraft introduced readers to Nyarlathotep in 1920, creating an entity that would become one of the most distinctive figures in cosmic horror literature. Unlike other beings in Lovecraft's literary universe, Nyarlathotep walked among humanity, actively participating in the corruption and downfall of civilizations, rather than remaining distant and indifferent. The creation of Nyarlathotep came during a particularly troubled period in Lovecraft's life. In the winter of 1920, Lovecraft experienced what he described as a severe bout of insomnia and fever. During this illness, he claimed to have had vivid, nightmarish visions that inspired the prose poem that would introduce Nyarlathotep to the world. Unlike many of his other creations, which he developed methodically through careful plotting and revision, Nyarlathotep emerged from what Lovecraft described as a dream state, giving the entity an immediacy and visceral quality that set it apart from his other cosmic beings. This origin in fevered dreams perhaps explained why Nyarlathotep differed so fundamentally from entities like Cthulhu or Yog-Sothoth. Where those beings represented incomprehensible cosmic forces operating according to alien geometries and physics, Nyarlathotep possessed a disturbing humanity in his methods. He deceived, he manipulated, he took apparent pleasure in the suffering he caused. He was not simply a force of nature, but something that acted with malicious intent. Lovecraft's fellow writers in the circle that developed what would later be called the Cthulhu Mythos recognized the unique nature of this entity. While other cosmic horrors required elaborate rituals, specific astronomical alignments, or ancient incantations to manifest their influence, Nyarlathotep could simply appear, adopting whatever form suited his purposes. This accessibility made him a useful figure for writers exploring themes of corruption, forbidden knowledge, and the fragility of human sanity. Throughout Lovecraft's career, from 1920 until his death in 1937, Nyarlathotep appeared more frequently in his works than almost any other cosmic entity, though often in subtle references or as a background presence rather than the central focus. This recurring presence suggested that Lovecraft found the concept particularly compelling, an entity that could serve as the active face of cosmic horror, the intermediary between humanity and forces beyond comprehension. Before we explore the nature, legends, and documented powers of this entity in detail, if you find value in these examinations of literary mythology and the development of cosmic horror as a genre, please consider subscribing and following this channel to support our continued explorations into the works of Lovecraft and his contemporaries. This entity's name itself carried weight and mystery. Lovecraft scholars have debated its origins for decades, with some suggesting Egyptian or Arabic influences, though Lovecraft himself never provided a definitive etymology. What remained clear was that the name was meant to evoke something ancient and fundamentally alien to Western ears. The construction of the name, with its unusual combination of sounds, created a sense of otherness that mirrored the entity's nature, something that could seem almost familiar yet remained fundamentally foreign. In Lovecraft's cosmology, Nyarlathotep occupied a unique position. While entities like Azathoth represented blind, mindless chaos at the center of infinity, Nyarlathotep possessed intelligence, purpose, and will. He was described as the soul and messenger of the outer gods, those incomprehensible beings that existed beyond the normal dimensions of space and time. This role made him essential to the functioning of Lovecraft's cosmic hierarchy. Where other entities simply existed, Nyarlathotep acted. Where others remained imprisoned or dormant, Nyarlathotep moved freely through dimensions and epochs. What made Nyarlathotep particularly terrifying was his ability to assume countless forms, each adapted to the culture and time period in which he manifested. This aspect earned him epithets such as the Haunter of the Dark, the Faceless God, and most famously, the Crawling Chaos. This multiplicity of forms suggested an entity unbounded by physical laws, able to remake itself according to whatever shape would most effectively accomplish his goals. The epithet crawling chaos itself suggested movement, purposeful advancement, and corruption that spread like a disease through civilizations. In Lovecraft's original 1920 prose poem, Nyarlathotep appeared as a tall, swarthy man who resembled an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. This figure traveled from city to city, demonstrating strange devices and cosmic knowledge that drove audiences into states of delirium and terror. Lovecraft wrote of how Nyarlathotep came out of Egypt, and how wild beasts followed him and licked his hands. The prose poem described him as wearing robes and appearing in public spaces, drawing crowds who came to witness his demonstrations of otherworldly science. The Haunter of the Dark, one of his most developed avatars, appeared in Lovecraft's 1935 story of the same name. This manifestation took the form of a three-lobed burning eye, a creature of living darkness that could not tolerate light. In The Haunter of the Dark, published in Weird Tales in December 1936, Lovecraft described this avatar as dwelling in an abandoned church in Providence, Rhode Island, specifically in the Federal Hill neighborhood. This form represented pure malevolence, trapped by something as simple as illumination, suggesting that even cosmic entities had their constraints. Other forms documented throughout the Lovecraft Circle's writings included the Mighty Messenger, who appeared as a tall, slim figure in pharaonic regalia, the Black Man of the witch cults, who served as the representative of dark powers at Sabbaths throughout New England, and the Dweller in Darkness, an entity of pure shadow. Each form served specific purposes. The Egyptian pharaoh impressed and awed civilized audiences, the Black Man presided over primitive rites, the Haunter embodied pure predatory darkness. Some references suggested even more alien forms. In certain texts, Nyarlathotep appeared as shifting geometric patterns as sentient shadows, or as entities that defied description entirely. This shape-shifting ability meant that encounters with Nyarlathotep might not be recognized as such. The entity could be anyone, anything, appearing in whatever guise would most effectively corrupt or destroy his target. Unlike many entities in the cosmic pantheon, Nyarlathotep's familial connections remained somewhat ambiguous in Lovecraft's original writings. However, later interpretations by other writers in the mythos suggested various relationships that helped establish his place in the cosmic hierarchy. Nyarlathotep was most commonly identified as the spawn or creation of Azathoth, the blind idiot god who bubbled and blasphemed at the center of infinity. In this relationship, Nyarlathotep served as Azathoth's messenger and soul, the active intelligence that carried out purposes in the cosmos, while Azathoth remained a mindless nuclear chaos. This relationship suggested that Nyarlathotep derived his power from the ultimate source of chaos itself, yet possessed the consciousness and will that Azathoth lacked. The dynamic between these two entities illustrated a fundamental principle in Lovecraft's cosmology. Power and intelligence did not necessarily align. Azathoth possessed incomprehensible power but no directed will, while Nyarlathotep had vast intelligence and purpose but served rather than ruled. This inversion of typical hierarchical structures, where the most powerful being was also the least conscious, created a sense of cosmic absurdity that permeated Lovecraft's vision. Some texts within the expanded mythos suggested connections to other entities. August Derleth, who extensively continued and systematized the mythos after Lovecraft's death, implied various relationships, though these expansions often departed from Lovecraft's original vision. Derleth's attempts to create a more structured mythology with clear genealogies and opposing forces sometimes contradicted Lovecraft's more ambiguous and nihilistic worldview. No wife or romantic consort was ever definitively established in Lovecraft's own works. As such, human concepts seemed irrelevant to beings of such cosmic scope. The notion of reproduction, partnership, or romantic attachment appeared meaningless when applied to entities that existed outside normal space and time. If Nyarlathotep had offspring or created other beings, it occurred through processes that bore no resemblance to human reproduction, perhaps through the corruption of existing entities, the shaping of cosmic forces, or methods entirely beyond human comprehension. Nyarlathotep's powers distinguished him from other cosmic entities through their directed, purposeful nature. Where other outer gods and great old ones remained largely indifferent to humanity, Nyarlathotep actively sought to corrupt, mislead, and destroy human civilization. This active malevolence made him more immediately dangerous than beings of far greater raw power. His primary power lay in deception and manipulation. Throughout various texts, he appeared as a master of disguise, able to assume forms pleasing or terrifying as circumstances required. He could walk among humans undetected, sowing discord and madness through subtle suggestion or overt demonstration of cosmic truths that shattered human sanity. This ability to blend in meant that Nyarlathotep's influence could pervade societies without detection, corrupting from within rather than attacking from without. In The Dreams in the Witch House, published in Weird Tales in July 1933, Nyarlathotep appeared as the Black Man, presiding over witch sabbaths and serving as the intermediary through which mortals could gain forbidden knowledge. Lovecraft wrote of how this figure facilitated dark pacts and led initiates through angles and dimensions that defied Euclidean geometry. The story featured Walter Gilman, a student at Miskatonic University whose studies of advanced mathematics led him to discover non-Euclidean spaces that connected his rented room to otherworldly dimensions. The Black Man appeared at the climax of these journeys, representing the ultimate corruption of mathematical and scientific pursuit. The entity possessed mastery over dreams and the spaces between waking and sleeping. In The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, a novella written in 1926 to 1927, though not published until 1943, Nyarlathotep demonstrated the ability to manipulate entire dream realms, trapping souls and tormenting them with visions of cosmic insignificance. This control over dreams meant that Nyarlathotep could attack victims even when they believed themselves safe in sleep, turning rest into torment and using the subconscious mind as a weapon against itself. His knowledge was vast and terrible. Nyarlathotep understood sciences and technologies far beyond human comprehension. In the original 1920 prose poem, Lovecraft described how Nyarlathotep showed all men great wonders through electrical devices that revealed glimpses of other dimensions and the horrifying truths of cosmic reality. This technological mastery appeared particularly significant given the era in which Lovecraft wrote. Electricity still seemed somewhat mysterious to many people, and the rapid pace of technological change created anxieties about where such progress might lead. He served as a communicator between realms, able to traverse the barriers that separated Earth from the domains of the outer gods. This role as messenger gave him access to knowledge and power that even other mighty entities might not possess directly. He could cross boundaries, enter spaces forbidden to others, and carry messages between beings that existed in fundamentally incompatible realities. Nyarlathotep's power over time and space appeared fluid and unpredictable. He could appear simultaneously in multiple locations, manifest across different eras, and manipulate the flow of events in ways that suggested he existed partially outside normal causality. This temporal flexibility meant that his schemes could span centuries or millennia, with actions taken in one era bearing fruit in another. Several key narratives established Nyarlathotep's character and demonstrated his methods of operation across different contexts and time periods. The original 1920 prose poem presented the most primal version of his legend. In this text, Nyarlathotep traveled through cities giving demonstrations that drove observers mad. Lovecraft wrote in first person of attending these exhibitions, describing how we followed him to a vast, vacant space, and witnessed visions of cosmic horror projected through strange machines. The narrator described 27 men who talked and talked after the demonstration, their minds shattered by what they had witnessed. The prose poem culminated in apocalyptic imagery, with the narrator describing visions of the world's end and cosmic chaos breaking through into reality. The power of this original text lay in its dreamlike quality and fragmented narrative. Lovecraft presented events without clear explanation, mimicking the confused and terrified state of someone experiencing incomprehensible phenomena. The demonstrations Nyarlathotep gave were never fully explained. Readers learned only that they involved electrical devices, projected visions, and revelations that destroyed sanity. This ambiguity made the entity more threatening than any detailed description could achieve. The novella, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, presented perhaps the most extensive exploration of Nyarlathotep's nature. In this story, the protagonist Randolph Carter sought the marvelous city of his dreams, only to discover that Nyarlathotep had been manipulating his quest from the beginning. The entity appeared in multiple forms throughout the narrative, as the Pharaoh, as one of the other gods, and finally revealing that the city Carter sought was merely a transmuted version of his own childhood memories. The story climaxed with Carter's escape from Nyarlathotep's clutches, through quick thinking and the intervention of Nodens, described as an elder god opposed to the outer god's chaos. This narrative demonstrated Nyarlathotep's methods on a grand scale. Rather than simply destroying Carter, the entity crafted an elaborate deception that would have resulted in Carter willingly giving up everything meaningful for an illusion. The cruelty of this approach, allowing Carter to quest for something unattainable while believing success was possible, illustrated Nyarlathotep's preference for psychological torment over simple destruction. In the short story The Haunter of the Dark, Lovecraft presented one of his final major stories featuring the entity. The tale centered on Robert Blake, a writer who became obsessed with the abandoned Church of Starry Wisdom on Federal Hill. Within the church's steeple, Blake discovered the shining trapezohedron, an ancient artifact that summoned the Haunter of the Dark. The story traced Blake's growing obsession and terror as he realized the creature could not approach in light, but waited for darkness. The narrative concluded with Blake's death during an electrical storm that plunged Providence into darkness, allowing the Haunter to claim him. In the story, published in Weird Tales, Lovecraft wrote of how Blake's last diary entry read, "The end is near. It will get me in the dark." The story worked as both a tribute to and friendly rivalry with Robert Bloch, who had killed off a character based on Lovecraft in one of his own stories. Lovecraft responded by killing off a character based on Bloch, though he did so with typical cosmic horror rather than simple revenge. The tale also explored themes of forbidden knowledge and the consequences of curiosity. Blake's writer's curiosity about the abandoned church ultimately led to his doom. The short story The Rats in the Walls, while not primarily focused on Nyarlathotep, contained references to the entity in the context of ancient underground cults. The story, published in Weird Tales in March 1924, described ancient worship practices that predated human civilization, suggesting Nyarlathotep's influence stretched back through eons. The protagonist discovered that his ancestral estate concealed vast caverns where generations of his family had engaged in cannibalistic rites, with references to the crawling chaos, suggesting Nyarlathotep's role in corrupting the family line. Despite his vast powers, certain limitations constrained even Nyarlathotep's actions. These weaknesses, while subtle, appeared throughout various texts and provided the only hope for those who encountered him. Light served as a barrier to some of his manifestations. The Haunter of the Dark specifically could not tolerate illumination, retreating from even modest sources of light. This weakness proved significant enough that the Church of Starry Wisdom had been abandoned specifically to trap the entity in the perpetual darkness of the sealed steeple. The symbolism was clear. Light represented knowledge, understanding, and rationality. All things that could at least temporarily hold back the darkness of cosmic horror. However, this weakness applied only to specific manifestations. Other forms of Nyarlathotep showed no such vulnerability, suggesting that each avatar had its own limitations, even if the entity as a whole remained nearly unstoppable. This meant that defeating one manifestation did not end the threat. Nyarlathotep could simply adopt a different form and continue his work. Nyarlathotep's power, while immense, remained derivative. He served the outer gods rather than acting entirely independently. This subordinate position suggested constraints on his autonomy. In The Dream Quest of Unknown Kedath, while Nyarlathotep demonstrated tremendous power over the Dreamlands, his ultimate purpose remained serving his masters rather than pursuing entirely independent goals. When Randolph Carter escaped, Nyarlathotep did not pursue him beyond the boundaries of his assigned domain, suggesting rules or limitations on his actions. Certain protective measures proved effective against him. Elder signs, ancient symbols used to ward against cosmic entities, could provide some protection. These signs appeared in various Lovecraft stories as talismans or inscriptions that could repel otherworldly forces. While not absolute defenses, they could at least slow or divert Nyarlathotep's attention, buying time for escape or resistance. Knowledge itself served as both weapon and vulnerability. Those who understood the true nature of cosmic reality might resist his deceptions, though such knowledge carried its own terrible price. Characters who recognized Nyarlathotep for what he was could sometimes avoid his traps, though this awareness often came at the cost of their sanity or peace of mind. The entity relied partially on ignorance and confusion. When confronted by someone who truly understood the cosmic order, his manipulations became less effective. The entity could be thwarted through cunning and understanding. In The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, Randolph Carter escaped Nyarlathotep's trap not through power, but through insight, recognizing the deception and calling upon forces opposed to the crawling chaos. This suggested that intelligence and awareness, while dangerous, could provide some defense against an entity that relied on deception and manipulation. Certain elder gods or other cosmic forces stood in opposition to Nyarlathotep and the outer gods. Nodens, described as an elder god, intervened to help Carter escape in The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. This suggested that cosmic hierarchies included beings who, while not necessarily benevolent toward humanity, at least opposed the complete chaos that Nyarlathotep represented. These entities could provide protection or assistance, though seeking their help carried its own risks. Understanding why Nyarlathotep stood out as particularly malevolent required examining his methods and motivations. Unlike entities that destroyed through indifference or whose very existence proved incompatible with human life, Nyarlathotep demonstrated active cruelty. He delighted in revelation, showing humans the truth of their cosmic insignificance, demonstrating that their civilizations, beliefs, and values meant nothing against the vast indifferent universe. This wasn't mere destruction, but psychological torment, stripping away the comforting illusions that allowed humanity to function. Where simply killing someone ended their suffering, Nyarlathotep preferred to shatter their worldview first, making them understand their meaninglessness before destroying them. His corruption was personal. Rather than simply destroying cities or civilizations wholesale, he worked through individuals, turning them against themselves and each other. The witches who worshipped him, the cultists who served the outer gods, the scholars driven mad by forbidden knowledge, all represented his handiwork. Each corruption was tailored to the individual, exploiting their particular weaknesses, ambitions, or curiosities. The entity represented the betrayal of reason itself. Where humanity relied on science, logic, and understanding to navigate reality, Nyarlathotep demonstrated that these tools revealed only deeper horror. The electrical devices in the 1920 prose poem, the mathematical formulae in The Dreams in the Witch House, the astronomical knowledge throughout various tales, all showed how human advancement led inevitably to cosmic despair. Progress didn't lead to enlightenment, but to madness. This philosophical dimension made Nyarlathotep particularly threatening to educated, rational people. A primitive who believed in spirits and demons might have psychological defenses against cosmic horror, but someone who believed in reason, science, and the comprehensibility of the universe faced total collapse when Nyarlathotep revealed the truth. The entity targeted specifically those who thought themselves safe through knowledge, showing them that knowledge itself was the danger. Nyarlathotep's malevolence also manifested in patience and long-term planning. Unlike entities that attacked directly, he could wait centuries or millennia for plans to come to fruition. He could corrupt one generation, knowing that the effects would only fully manifest several generations later. This temporal scope meant that his victims often had no idea they were being manipulated until far too late to resist. Throughout various texts, cults dedicated to Nyarlathotep appeared more frequently and in more diverse forms than those serving other entities. The Church of Starry Wisdom in The Haunter of the Dark represented one such organization, having existed since 1844 before its abandonment in 1877. Lovecraft described how the church had been suspected of vague horrors and demoniac rites before its members mysteriously vanished or died. The church maintained its headquarters in an imposing Gothic structure in Providence's Federal Hill neighborhood. Within this building, the cult possessed the shining trapezohedron, an ancient artifact described as a window to all time and space. Through this object, the cultists could contact the Haunter of the Dark, though the price of such contact often proved devastating. The Church's history suggested cycles of activity and dormancy, with periods of growth followed by catastrophic events that scattered or destroyed the congregation. The Black Man of the witch cults represented another manifestation of Nyarlathotep's religious presence. References throughout Lovecraft's New England stories suggested an underground tradition of worship stretching back centuries, with covens meeting in remote locations to perform ceremonies presided over by this figure. These witch cults appeared in stories like The Dreams in the Witch House and The Festival, suggesting an organized network that had survived from colonial times into the 20th century. These witch cults practiced rites that blended European witchcraft traditions with worship of cosmic entities. They met on significant dates, Walpurgis Night, Halloween, and other times when the barriers between worlds grew thin. The Black Man led them in ceremonies that violated human taboos, from ritual sacrifice to congress with non-human entities. Members gained powers and knowledge in exchange for service and eventual damnation. Unlike cults of other entities, which often sought to summon or release their imprisoned gods, Nyarlathotep's followers served a being already active and present. Their worship involved collaboration rather than supplication, making them more like agents than mere devotees. Nyarlathotep could grant immediate rewards, knowledge, power, revenge against enemies, rather than promising future benefits when their god eventually awakened or returned. This accessibility made his cults more dangerous and more successful at recruitment. A cult promising that Cthulhu would eventually rise and reward the faithful required faith and patience. A cult where Nyarlathotep himself might appear at ceremonies and grant demonstrable powers offered immediate gratification. This explained why references to his worship appeared more frequently than cults of supposedly more powerful entities. The cults also served Nyarlathotep's purposes as intelligence networks and agents of corruption. Through his followers, he could monitor human affairs, identify promising targets for corruption, and execute plans that required human hands. A network of cultists across different cities, professions, and social classes gave him reach that even his shape-shifting powers alone could not achieve. Certain objects appeared in Lovecraft's stories as connected to Nyarlathotep, serving as foci for his power or tools for summoning his various manifestations. The shining trapezohedron, featured prominently in The Haunter of the Dark, was described as an ancient artifact of unknown origin. Lovecraft wrote that it was a window on all time and space that allowed viewers to see across dimensions and through history. However, gazing into the trapezohedron attracted the attention of the Haunter of the Dark, effectively summoning that manifestation of Nyarlathotep. The artifact's history suggested incredible age. According to the story, it had been crafted on the planet Yuggoth, brought to Earth in primordial times, and passed through various civilizations before coming into the possession of the Church of Starry Wisdom. Each culture that possessed it met with disaster, suggesting the object was cursed, or that knowledge gained through it came at terrible cost. The trapezohedron represented a perfect trap. It offered what humans most desired: knowledge, the ability to see beyond normal limitations, understanding of cosmic mysteries. Yet using it inevitably brought destruction. This pattern of offering desirable bait that concealed terrible danger characterized many of Nyarlathotep's methods. Other artifacts appeared in various stories. Certain books of forbidden knowledge, while not created by Nyarlathotep, contained information about summoning him or described his various forms. The Necronomicon, Lovecraft's most famous fictional grimoire, included references to the crawling chaos and instructions for rituals connected to his worship. Talismans and symbols associated with his cults appeared in multiple stories. These objects served as identification between cultists as foci for rituals or as keys to accessing hidden knowledge. Unlike the elder signs that protected against cosmic entities, these symbols invited Nyarlathotep's attention and influence. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, stood unique among cosmic entities, active where others remained dormant, malevolent where others proved indifferent, and present where others existed as distant threats. His 1,000 forms allowed him to adapt to any era or culture. His role as messenger made him essential to cosmic operations beyond human comprehension, and his delight in human suffering elevated him beyond mere natural force to something approaching evil in the cosmic scheme. His recognition within Lovecraft's cosmic pantheon stemmed from his active engagement with humanity. While other entities represented forces so vast and alien that they barely noticed human existence, Nyarlathotep made humanity his focus, his playground, his victims. This attention made him the most relevant cosmic horror to human affairs, the entity most likely to be encountered, and therefore the most immediately threatening. From ancient Egypt to 20th century Providence, from primitive witch sabbaths to demonstrations of advanced technology, Nyarlathotep adapted and persisted, an immortal force of corruption that could never be permanently defeated, only temporarily thwarted. Thank you for joining this exploration of the crawling chaos. If you found this journey into cosmic mythology enlightening, please share it with others who appreciate the darker corners of literary creation and the development of horror as a serious literary genre. We'll continue examining the pantheon of cosmic entities in future episodes, each focusing on the unique terrors they represent and the philosophical questions they raise about humanity's place in an indifferent universe. Until then, keep seeking knowledge, but perhaps, as Lovecraft suggested, be wary of what you might find, for some truths shatter rather than enlighten, and some doors once opened can never be closed again.